Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Pathway Grace Pathway Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Roberts, and we are so excited that you're joining us today, wherever you're tuning in from, or maybe you're watching this later. Welcome. We are so about helping people find and follow God, and we believe that this platform right here, we just want to tell stories of all that God's done in people's lives. And so, hey, before we go into it, I want to remind you, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all the things that we're posting, letting you know about all the content we're trying to release. Make sure you like and share this video. We always want to know what God's doing in and through this. And so we're going to jump right into it today. I've invited my good friend, Azure Granger. Welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And this is exciting. I'm glad to have you on.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we've known each other now for a few years.
Yep.
And I consider you one of my favorite people.
So
and
sweet.
you are not above 5 foot. And
No.
yet,
coming out strong with that.
but I feel like you're a giant at heart. And
I am. Yeah. When you're this tall, you have to have a lot of personality.
I love
and
that.
I absolutely do.
I love
Yeah.
that so much. I know I can joke with you because my wife is also very short. So
Yes.
we always joke
Yeah.
the height thing. But man, we got to talk a lot about some stuff
Yeah.
today because I know you've got a cool story of what God's done. But before we get into there, for those of you who don't know Azure, you serve in multiple different places. You're kind of everywhere at
Yep.
this church. You've
Everywhere all the time.
I know you serve. You serve in young adults.
Yep.
You help out there a bunch. You also serve with our senior high and our high schoolers.
Yep.
You serve on the worship team.
Yep.
You're on the prayer team. you occasionally will take pictures for me
Yep.
and help with the social media content. Also, you're just available.
Yeah.
To just meet and love people.
Yes. 100%.
Tell me, what brought you to Pathway?
Yeah. So that's a big story.
Okay,
And
we can go back further.
Okay. It kind of wraps into I guess my whole being raised, upbringing, all the things.
So let's go back there. Let's go back
just
to the
start
beginning.
from the beginning. So I was the first 7-8 years of my life. I grew up in Whitmore,
Okay.
which is a little bit, west of Shingletown, up in the mountains. So it takes 45 minutes to get from where we lived into town.
Okay.
And my dad drove it every day to work in a sawmill out in Shasta Lake. So my dad came into town every day, but when I was growing up, it was very much my parents moved up into the mountains to be left alone. Very little house on the prairie lifestyle.
Churning butter.
Well, not quite that far, but big garden, hunting, making your own sauerkraut.
Okay.
Microwaves, not allowed.
Right.
The very holistic, out in the mountains.
Some people would call that the dream.
Yeah, I miss it,
Yeah.
100%. That's my dream, is to go back to it.
Really?
When you're younger, you're this is kind of lame, because I'm an only child for the most part. I have a half brother, but he was 15 when I was born.
Okay,
so
so
he's
two
already,
different lifestyles.
Yeah, two
Okay.
completely different lifestyles. And he would come visit, which was always amazing. We have a great relationship.
Cool.
But I was very much just me. So it was me, little kid, parents doing their thing, homeschooled.
Making your own sauerkraut.
Making my own sauerkraut.
That's awesome.
Some of the memories are crazy. Me and the dog would just be out on the property, just wandering around. And I was 4. We had a dog so I wouldn't get bit by rattlesnakes, is what my dad always says.
No, you lost me at snakes. I'm out.
Big
I'm out.
snakes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, bobcats, deer, all the things.
Yeah.
Out in the woods. Yeah. 100%.
That's amazing.
Yes. And so part of that, my parents moved out there to kind of be away from everybody.
Yeah.
And so it was great. It was amazing. But I was an only child, living life, just doing my thing.
Sure.
And we didn't come into town on the weekends for church, but I was raised in a very Christian home.
Okay.
So during all of my homeschooling years, every single day, there was some kind of Bible teaching of some form in there. So it was a faith-based craft, or watching VeggieTales for 30 minutes, or reading out of the Bible. It was always there. So I was very much raised in a Christian home, which is amazing.
Sure.
But it was pretty disconnected because so many things were going on in my life of my mom's side of the family is kind of crazy. And so there's always drama happening. And that's why we lived so far away. So they wouldn't come to see us as often.
The truth is out.
The truth is out.
There it is.
It was a lot. It was a lot.
No, that's good.
And then my mom got really sick right around the time that I turned 5. And so she actually got really sick with breast cancer, and she passed away when I was 7. So those last couple of years of living there, I was already really young. And it was, my brother started living with us full time to be a caretaker for my mom, which was amazing and super helpful. But it was a lot of okay, we only go into town when we really have to. We never really attended church in the first place because we just did it all at home. And so I knew who God was, knew who Jesus was, all the Bible stories, all the things. But I feel like it was probably pretty disconnected of like, oh yeah, like this is just our lifestyle and everybody else lives like this too.
Right.
Less of, oh, a lot of people don't believe in God, or, oh, a lot of churches are different. It was very much like, this is who we are.
It's all you knew.
Yeah, I knew.
All you knew.
Yeah. And I loved my childhood. My parents were amazing. They were older when I was born. So I think my mom was like 42-ish.
Okay.
My dad was around the same age. So they were very much like, yeah, we're just living life, doing our own thing.
Yeah.
And so then after my mom passed away, we moved into town. And from that point on, I started going to public school, meeting lots of people. And my best friend at the time, who lived across the street of the little complex we were in, which was really cool, her family came here. And she was like, hey, you should come to church. I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I don't know. And my dad worked a lot. And so he was like, yeah, you should absolutely go. But also I'm going to sleep on Sundays because that's one of my 2 days. And I work 60 hours a week. So I started going with them and I loved it. So we come in a neighborhood at the time.
Yeah.
And I got plugged into youth ministry and Awana and I loved it. Like instantly super into it. It was like, oh yeah, like these are all the stories I grew up with, all the stories I learned. Everyone here was amazing. We had some other family friends that actually were here and like worked here on staff. And so I got plugged in really quickly. And then I think it was my first/only year that I did Awana. It's hard to remember it all, but I received Christ in Awana. Yeah, on a Thursday night with Bob Reginato. Which, that was a really sweet memory. And I remember being like, oh yeah, like I know who Jesus is, but he actually walked through, I don't know if we were calling it the ABCs at that point, but the gospel presentation.
Yeah.
And they did it fairly often in Awana. I remember hearing it a lot, but that first time I was like, oh, yeah, like...
It like light bulb went off.
Yeah, sign me up, like 100%. I already know Jesus, but yeah, I want to live life with him.
Go to Awana. And get saved.
And get saved. Man. It is funny to hear other, like, our pastors talk about, like, oh, yeah, like, when I was a kid in this ministry or, like, after a ministry with my parents, I got saved. And it's just like, oh, yeah, like, it's so interesting how when you grow up in the church and a part of all of that, like, you really, that usually tends to be the moment where you're like, yeah, 100%, that childlike faith, sign me up.
100%. I mean, I can relate because I think, it's one of those things when you've been raised in it and it's like, all the stories, you memorize the scripture, you're doing all the things, but you don't actually understand the why. It's just a part of what you do. It's just part of the norm.
Yeah.
Then when you are given a choice of like, hey, now you have this choice of going to this or being a part of this, there's a moment that you're given of like, do you want this? And that's awesome.
Yeah.
That you were able to come to Awana and for it to not be like this, oh my gosh, this is totally drastically different from everything, but it's like, wow, this is a really tangible thing for me to get. Yeah. I want to go back a little bit because how old were you? You said you were 7 years old when your mom passed away?
Yeah, 7, almost 8.
7, almost 8. Those were very pivotal moments. You remember those things.
Yeah.
You had, first, second grade?
The end of my 3rd grade year.
End of your 3rd grade year. Okay. Yeah, my daughter's 9 and she's in 3rd grade, so that makes sense. Okay. And yet you were raised as Christian home. What was that? Talk to me about that real quick. As much as you're willing to, because I know that's a lot for a young only child, really, to be going through something like that, where you're living up in the bush people life.
Yep.
To then your wife is completely rocked.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really interesting. Because I was raised in a house where I think because I was an only child, my parents were older, and they had lived very, like, independent lives, or they were expected, like, their whole lives to take care of their families. So, like, when my dad was young, his dad left their family, and so he became the caretaker of his mom and his sisters right away. So he was very independent. He had to be very mature. My mom was raised where her siblings were older when she was born, and so she was kind of living the like retirement life with her parents. And so both my parents kind of decided like, yeah, we're just going to raise her as a small adult, basically.
Sure.
And so I always had a lot of freedom. I was raised to be very mature, very independent. And so I was kind of brought into everything that was going on. One, because we lived in the mountains and everything was happening at home. Like my mom wasn't staying in hospitals. She didn't really believe in modern medicine. Sure. And a lot of the she did a lot of the holistic healing type practices with essential oils and light therapy, like a lot of the holistic style stuff,
Right.
which wasn't necessarily bad, but it also wasn't necessarily helping.
Yeah.
And so all of that stuff was just like in our home, and none of it was bad. None of it was like scary, but I was very aware all the time of what was going on. Kind of because I had to be, because it was expected, like, oh, I'm going to help, like, clean the house or take care of the animals or whatever needed to be done, even from a really young age. And when my brother started living with us, it was super helpful because he stepped in to be that caretaker and to help do my homeschooling and just kind of make things work while my dad had to actually be at work.
Wow.
And it was definitely hard, 100%. I think there's some things that I've, like, forgotten or blocked out because when you're little and you go through that, it's like,
Sure.
what do we do with all of this? But it was really quite the journey, because even at the very end, when my mom was like really, really sick before she passed away, she opted into having in-home nursing care. And so like the hospital bed was set up in our living room, and the oxygen machines were like in the garage, and everything was hooked up, and she was in the home all the way up until she passed away.
Wow.
And I think the hardest part of all of that was like, I was sad, of course, but I saw it coming for so long because she was sick for several years, that it was like, okay, like we gotta make it happen. We gotta get through it. And I'm sure it was a lot harder for my brother because he was an adult and could like fully go through all of that. But the hardest part was watching my dad lose his wife.
Yeah.
That was so hard.
Yeah.
But my dad is amazing. He's so strong. He's so awesome. He's such a hard worker. And he and I are like best friends, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So I think part of that later in life was really hard when I got married, moving out of the house, because it had been just him and I for a long time. But yeah, it's really interesting to think back on and to see the grace and the provision that the Lord had for us in those moments, because we always had people to help us, always had people to take care of us. Like people and resources always cropped up, even when I'm sure it felt really hard for my dad.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's so interesting to walk through that and like remember being so little and to walk through that loss, and to try to like fathom what that would be like as an adult, because I think I just have such a different view of it at that moment.
Yeah.
And I think there were several times that I remember, I prayed all the time. Like I remember praying all the time as a kid, being like, Lord, please heal my mom. Please make this better.
Right.
But looking back on it too, like I know that my mom also made some choices about how she thought that her healing could happen, as far as like natural medicine and not believing the doctors were going to be helpful, or that chemotherapy was going to be too much. She had a lot of views on a lot of things.
Sure.
And she was I think she really depended on the Lord, and she kind of settled into a place of like, well, the Lord's either going to, provide healing for me, or it's my time. Which is it's really interesting to think about.
Yeah.
And like, I wonder where she kind of ended up in that mindset, like with the Lord, as far as like, okay, like this is just what's going to happen. It's my time. But I prayed a lot, like, Lord, help us, help our family, help my mom. Yeah. And I don't think I ever ended up mad at the Lord for what happened.
Okay.
And I think a big part of that was getting connected into a church right away. Really? And seeing like the goodness and having like people in our lives that were really like kind to us. And that I've had so many women over the years step in and be my mom, which is so cool.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's
so cool.
Yeah, you already answered the question, because I'm like, to be 7, 8, and you go through something so traumatic for so long. Yeah. And then to be able to like be who you are now, and one is remarkable.
Thanks.
But throughout that, I mean, to be praying and then to go experience loss. Yeah. To not have that as questions that most people naturally go to is, God, how could you do this? Yeah. How could you allow this? How could you love her and love me and say that that's okay? Yeah. But for you to jump right into church and find grace and find that experience love, God's love through people and other people, is truly awesome, because I know that's not always the case for some people. Yeah. Talk to me real quick. Like, you have this whole life up in the mountains, living life. You lose your mom. Now your world completely changes. I mean, you go from having your mom to with years of dealing with this situation, to now you're living in town. Yeah. Like, that alone has got to be an adjustment of like culture shock.
Yeah, it was a little bit of culture shock. I think I also was so ready. Like, I have always been a big personality.
Your social butterfly was ready to
I think it shocked my dad, honestly, like how ready I was, especially once I started the public school like scene.
Sure.
I was like, this is amazing. Like, I get to switch classes. I get to meet all these people. Like, this is crazy.
That's crazy. Because most people who have come from a homeschool world, because you said homeschooled, and so I got to go there. From people when they had transitioned into, I would say, we would call it even sometimes the real world.
Yes.
Just because you're exposed, there's no limitations.
I'm sure it's a little bit awkward, and like I'm sure I don't remember it, and like I made a few friends really quickly, which was like awesome. I think that was a big help too, because they were just so nice to me, and they were like, oh, like, where did you come from? Because I went to Columbia. That's where I started public school, more or less. And all those kids, like almost all of those kids had been together since kindergarten. Like I was in 4th grade, and all those kids had been together for a long time, but they were all so nice, which was amazing. And technically, after my mom passed, I had like 3 months left of 3rd grade. Okay. And my dad and my brother were like, we've got a lot to deal with. You're going to go to the tiny public school that is in Whitmore and just like be there for 3 months. And that is like, there's 2 classrooms in that school.
Sure.
Kindergarten through 3rd grade is in one classroom. 4th through 8th grade is in the other classroom.
Okay.
And there was like maybe 30 kids total, I think, in the whole school.
Sure.
And it was very much like the school chef, like we'd go do cooking lessons with her. And the little library was also the public library for the whole area. So it was I think that was a good little start.
I was going to say, that's like a really cool, like.
It was so fun. I think it was super fun.
That sounds like charter schools nowadays. Yes. It's like, go learn how to be a chef when you're in 3rd grade. Yes. And now they're like, this is great. Yeah. And all the staff there, like, I think my dad, of course, like had a conversation with everybody and was like, hey, like, this is our situation. Yeah. Good luck. We're going to be here for a little bit. Sure. It's going to be fine. And everybody there was so amazing, like all the adults. And a lot of the kids' parents worked there. And like, it was a really good experience. It's hilarious thinking back on of like, wow, I went to this tiny little school for like 3 months. I learned the violin while I was there. Like, it was... Yes, you did.
Yes, I did.
Yes,
it was crazy.
Along with, churning butter. That's where it happened.
That's where it all happens. They'd, like, send us for PE to go run this loop that was around the school that was, like, in the woods partially because it's all the woods.
Fight off the rattlesnakes.
And I was like, what? We're just out here? Like, and there's no adults. Like, the teacher would be like, go run 3 laps and come back. And she'd just be in the classroom the whole time. It's a
different world.
It's totally different world. And I was like, okay, cool, whatever.
I love that.
And we started going to the little Baptist church that was up there, too, for a couple months. Because I don't know if my dad was like, she needs this, or if somebody at the school invited us and was like, this would be good for her. And that was like, really small congregation. There's a tiny little room in the back where all the kids go and do Sunday school type stuff.
Sure.
It's like some of the most formative like moments I think in my life. Sure. Just like, wow, this is what life is like. Like this is what it's like to be around people.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. I'm glad that I think it was a really good transition of like a couple smaller things.
Yeah, before you jumped full into neighborhood
and full bore into everything else. School. Yeah, because then that summer I would get up every morning with my dad at 4 a.m. and be taken to a neighbor's house to stay with them during the day because they had a couple older daughters and they would watch me and kind of babysit me while my dad was at work. So the whole summer I spent at a friend's house, basically, learning to swim, doing whatever. And then we moved into town at the end of summer into a little duplex thing. And then I started public school. And it was like, okay, we're doing it.
We're doing it.
We're doing it. And I think probably the first few months of like actual public school was like, okay, this is a lot, but we're going to make it work. But really soon after that, I started going to neighborhood and getting to know people.
Sure.
And from there I was like, yes, this is it. This is where I belong.
With the people.
With the people.
The hidden Ariel. I just want to be where the people are.
Yes, I need to be where the people are. I do. I'm one of those extroverts that like recharges when I'm around people. Yeah. Even if I'm so tired, I get around my people and I'm like, yes, okay, this is going to be fine.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my dad is not like that. Like he loves to be social, but he's also like, I'm good. Like I don't need to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a very different dynamic of me being like, let's go to all these things. And my dad being like, no, thank you.
So great. It's so great.
Yeah.
What grade? You said for like fourth grade
yeah.
coming to Pathway.
Yeah.
Back then neighborhood.
Yep.
What was, and then were you a part of Path ever since?
Yeah. So I think I was counting back yesterday. I think it's been like 15 years at this point that I've been at this church, which is amazing.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel that long, but it also does feel like a really long time. And I remember when we started, because we were hopping around to a few different churches before I got invited by a friend to come to the Awana program. So we went over to Little Country and we came here and I think one or two others. And I remember being in the ministry center and just seeing people worshiping. And there's a couple ladies in the back that were just like 100% in worship, arms up, dancing around, which was pretty different for this church at that point. Like most people were just singing the songs and minding their business. But I saw how like in tune that woman was with the Lord and just like excited to be there fully in worship. And that was kind of the start of like, I want whatever that is.
Wow.
100%. Whatever she's got going on, whatever her relationship is with the Lord, that's where I'll be.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Sign me up. Is that also where you discovered like this passion for music and worship?
Yeah, which was really, that was kind of the first moment. And then went to Awana, was saved. And I think once I got into the junior high program was a little bit more when I was like, oh, like students can be involved in worship team and like this is what it's like to worship the Lord and like be excited about songs and go to camp and all of that.
Sure.
But I think that was definitely one of the formative moments of like, oh, like, wow, worship is so powerful. Yeah.
So when did you meet Nate? By the way, she is not a Granger by birth.
Yep.
Married into the Granger family.
Yes.
Long history here at Pathway.
Long history.
We love the Grangers.
Yes,
they're foundational pillars in this church,
Yes.
and we love every single one of them. They serve. They lead. They're our amazing family.
Yes, they are.
And all of a sudden now you are taking on their last name.
I have. Yep.
And you've been married now for how long?
3.5 years.
3.5 years.
Yeah,
which
a little
is
more
awesome.
than that. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Tell me the story here. How did you and Nate kindle? Two very different people
Two very different people
found each other.
found each other.
Yeah.
Here we are. We found each other here at the church.
Yeah. Okay. Stop. That right there. If you're single and watching this show or watching this episode, I'm going to tell you again. If you want to meet somebody, meet so in the right ways at church.
Yep.
Enough said.
Be involved.
Be at church.
Be involved.
Don't
People who
don't
care.
be creeping and looking just to find that certain somebody. Get plugged in.
involved.
Get plugged in for the right reasons.
Yes.
And then they will naturally be presented. It's
Yeah,
true.
I mean, that's how you meet anybody. That's how you, like, create community no matter what,
That's right.
especially within a church, is being involved. I have been involved basically for, like, the last 13 years because I came to Awana.
Right.
I was too young to really, like, volunteer or do anything. But one of the women who stepped into my life and is like a mother to me, she's amazing. She worked here on staff and she was working in the Awana program.
Oh, awesome.
And so right away, like as soon as I kind of started graduating out of it, she was like, you're going to be a leader. And I said, okay, sign me up. And I trained with a couple really amazing women who were leaders here at the time for Awana. And I did Awana for 7 years.
Did you really?
I did.
I don't think I knew this.
Yeah, because I stopped like, well, let's see, 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
3 or 4 years ago, I stopped because there's some shifts with like how the timing of all the ministries were happening.
Sure.
Because in high school, I was kind of helping with junior high, and I did Awana basically middle school through high school, and I loved it. A lot of our like now junior hires and like freshmen, sophomores are kids that I had when they were 3 and 4.
Oh, cool.
And it just makes my heart so happy. I'm like, I knew you when you were 3 years old. And they're like, please don't say that to anyone. The high schoolers are like, don't tell anyone.
You don't know me.
You don't know me.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it's
awesome.
so fun. But so I did Awana for, a long time. And then when they switched things around with the schedule a little bit, I had been doing Awana and high school at the same time. And like I was in high school.
Yeah.
So I think I stepped out of Awana because all the schedules didn't work out, and I was really bummed about it. But it was also kind of one of those like, yeah, it's time to see what the Lord has for next.
Before you go any further,
Yeah.
I realize we know what Awana is. Maybe somebody who doesn't know what Awana is, because I went to Awana
Yep.
and I went. But tell people today, what is Awana?
Okay,
And by
so
the way, Pastor
Awana-
Bill's very happy right now because he's Mr. Awana.
He is Mr. Awana. So Awana stands for Approved Workmen Are Not Ashamed. And it is basically a youth program for like little kids. So 3 years through, I think it technically goes through like 6th grade, 5th or 6th grade. And it's basically a youth group for young kids. And so there's lots of learning and reciting scripture, which is amazing. I mean, I still remember all of the,
It's
not all of
ingrained.
it. It's a great thing. Yeah, it's in there. It's deep in there. Way deep in there.
Right.
And I'll surprise myself sometimes. Somebody will say, a verse and I'm like, Yeah. Yep. That's
I
that
know
one.
that. I know that.
I know that. And it's like crafts and learning scripture and songs, worship. Like it is just like little mini services, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Like the kids have so much fun. It's so good for kind of their development of learning Bible stories and learning what's involved as far as like the early, I guess, those foundational stories in the Bible.
Yeah.
But then also kind of learning like, oh, like Jesus loves us and he died for our sins and all those basics.
Some of those pretty basic, but also, like you said, foundational truths that I think can be like those moments in your like your identity. You're like, yeah, I'm clinging on to that one.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
There were moments in Awana where I was like, ugh. It's like school after school, and but then looking back, I'm like, no, I just had the wrong approach, and it can
and you know this, I'm fiercely competitive. So there's a reward system for learning scripture and reciting Bible books.
Sign me up for Bible books.
And I spent a lot of time and effort reciting and learning and memorizing scripture to earn those Bible books.
And you had a stack.
I did.
You were loaded with the stack on
stack.
It
was more about getting the little patches and like finishing books. That's where I was like, we're doing it. We got it.
That's so good.
Yeah, so good.
Awana. Okay, Awana. So you started to transition out of Awana.
Yeah, transitioned out of Awana. Because I was, did it through junior high, was kind of I would go to junior high ministry on the weekends, and then when I got out of high school, I was asked to stay as a leader for a little while, because there was some transition stuff happening, and I had a lot of those younger kids that I had in Awana before kind of transitioning in, which was super cool. And so then it was high school ministry, and then prayer team, young adults, worship, all the things.
Okay, so where in that did you meet Nate?
Yeah. Thank you. I forgot Could you tell that I was like, oh, where did this question go? I'm not going to ask. Hopefully you'll just tell me.
And it's my fault, because I asked the Awana question.
That's okay. Yeah, so when I was, let's see, because I've been here for a long time, Nate and his family started coming here, I think when he was, oh gosh, I'm going to mess this up, and they're all going to watch it, and they're going to laugh at me.
That's fine.
In his early high school years, I think it was like his freshman year of high school that they moved here. I could be 4-8, somewhere in there. Okay. Yeah, somewhere in there. I did not know him for a couple years. A big part of that was I really never went to youth group during the week because my dad worked, like he would get up at like 3 or 4 a.m. and I did not have a ride to be taken home after youth group for the most part. So it was like, well, if you don't have a ride, you're not going. I was like, okay, sure. So I really did not know him because we weren't really running in the same circles until kind of my sophomore year of high school.
Okay.
And this is it's a big story. There's a lot of details here. The gist of it is that he was talking to a friend of mine, and they were doing their thing, and I still, did not really know who he was. I was like, yeah, good for you, whatever. I'm not really interested in dating anybody. I'm good, whatever. I got too many things going on. And then that didn't work out, and I ended up in the mixture of kind of the fallout of it, it's a whole story, it's a whole thing. But I ended up in that, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, I'm getting to know who he actually is. I'm like, oh yeah, this kid's really nice, great, also homeschooled, very, his family comes from a great family of very mature, very much family focused, church focused, all of those things, which is great, but they were pretty quiet. He and his sister, who were the two that I knew at the time, were really pretty quiet as far as I knew. And I was out here with Aiden and Brittany and a few of the others, and we're loud and obnoxious and kind of, sorry Aiden and Brittany, but at the time, they
would admit it.
Yeah, at the time in high school, we were a little bit crazy for the most part. And so I didn't know Nate super well, but then I got invited to this middle of the week game night that was happening, where it was kind of Nate and Aiden and a bunch of the other guys, their small group that they had started, and it had developed into we're going to do a board game night, and we might let some of the girls that we're interested in start showing up.
Smart.
Yeah.
Smart play, guys.
Yep. And Nate loves this. I was invited by somebody else.
Oh.
In the first place.
Love that.
Yeah, love that. And it, again, was another one of those middle of the week, okay, well, you better have somebody to drive you home because I'm not going to come get you situations.
Sure.
And nobody could drive other people at that point except for Nate. So, and we didn't live our parents don't live very far from each other, even still. And so it was one end of Shasta View I lived on, he lived on the other end. And the house that we were at was right in the middle. So I was like, okay, well, no big deal. And so at some point, he volunteered to drive me home. And I think it was more of just like, oh, yeah, like, I'm going to be nice. Like, somebody needs to take her home, whatever.
Sure.
And so we started talking, and very quickly it was just like, oh, like, we just get along so well. He's very funny.
Yeah.
He's very funny.
He is very funny.
He's very funny.
Who's gonna drive me home? Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's very funny. I laughed at his jokes, which then he was like,
oh boy, that's fuel to the flame right there.
Yeah. Yep. And we just kind of like started to get to know each other. So this was the beginning of summer.
Yeah.
Was when we started talking. He had just graduated high school. He was about to start Simpson in the fall. I was going into my junior year or something like that. And it was one of those hilarious moments where a lot of my friends in school had been like, oh, like, I'm dating this person, or, you know, like, oh, I'm so interested in so-and-so. And I'd been interested in people, but I was also like, nah.
I don't got time for that.
Not interested.
Yeah.
And, like, I had wanted to be dating somebody, but I remember so clearly being like, Lord, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get married till I'm like 27, so do whatever you want, God. I don't know why, but I was like, late 20s is when I'm going to get married. Mm-hmm. The Lord laughs, especially at weird plans that we make like that.
Yeah.
And so I had just been like, yeah, God, I'm good. I don't need to date anyone. I'm fine. And then all of a sudden Nate shows up, and I'm like, no, I'm not interested.
Right.
No. And so we very quickly just connected and became friends. And Lord bless his parents. His parents are so wise. Because my dad was like, yeah, like, you can date people, that's fine, make good choices.
Yeah.
Don't be silly about anything. Mm-hmm. His parents were like, well, you guys don't really know each other, so maybe you shouldn't start dating. And we, of course, were like,
we're all just falling apart. Yeah.
But we're so good for each other and all these things. And his parents were like, well, you should probably start Simpson and, like, get used to that lifestyle of commuting and having a job and, like, all these things that you haven't really done before you start dating someone. Like, that's a lot. And we could see the wisdom in it for sure, but I was also like, like, this is
Don't
lame.
tell me how to live my life.
Yeah, don't tell me how to live my life. And it was very different because he came from a household where there was a lot of great rules set in place, but I came from a household that it was like, here's the 3 rules, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of freedom, which is like, it was great, and I handled it really well, but it definitely was the amount of freedom of like, somebody else would not have handled this as well.
I probably would not have done well.
Yeah.
Probably not.
I think it was the fear of my father. Like, people have the fear of the Lord. There is a fear of my father for sure. Of I'm not going to mess this up.
I love and respect that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, for sure. So looking back on it, 100% was the right choice. Absolutely. Because we didn't really know each other.
Yeah.
Like, we had barely known each other through a different friend. And through, another friend. And, like, our friend groups were kind of circling around each other, interacting. Everybody's starting to get their license. It was like, oh, like, let's go do things now. Sure. Let's go hang out. Let's go on hikes, whatever. But we did not know each other that well. So we spent the summer, like, going out with friends, hanging out with other people. Pool parties were held at his house for, like, high school ministry, which was super fun.
Right.
And so I slowly started to get to know him and his family. And it was hard, especially once, like, fall hit. And we both went back to school because we were both really busy. But we were also like, oh, we want to date each other. So it was like 8 months of getting to know each other, becoming friends. Super great. Like, 100% recommend that to anyone.
Yes.
Don't just start dating somebody. Get to know them. Yeah. You can, like, go and hang out, like, go on a hike, go on a walk.
Sure.
Go to Barnes & Noble. Like, whatever you're going to do to get to know each other. You don't have to call those dates. Right. But also, like, you should know who you're going to date. For sure.
It's intentional.
It's intentional.
It's intentional.
It's super intentional because, like, what if you find out that they're crazy? I don't know. Like,
yeah.
There's like a lot of things that can happen in that realm.
Like, they don't eat meat or something. And you, as a person who loves a good steak, like, it's important in your life.
It's true.
Not saying if you don't eat meat, it's not a good
totally
thing.
Fine.
Totally fine. But
totally fine.
But for some people, they've got their things.
My thing was sushi. And Nate was raised in a large family, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, they were not going out to eat a lot. And I was raised where there was 3 of us in our family for the most part. And so, like, we'd go out. My grandma loved to go to Olive Garden and, like, these places on the weekends. So, like, it was like going out to lunch with grandma was a big deal, all the things. So we were raised very differently as far as food and spending money on food is concerned. And so when we started actually dating, I was like, yeah, we're going to go sushi. And Nate was like, what? Who? On whose budget? And I was like, well,
Girls
yours.
Are expensive.
Yeah. And he didn't really know that he liked sushi, and now he really likes sushi.
And now he's doomed.
Now he's doomed. Now he's doomed. I'm an expensive wife. I love food, and I love to travel.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Hey.
Some people, it's just the way it is.
Hey, food is the way to anyone's heart right
It
there.
really is. It's definitely the way to my heart, for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so we started dating.
Yeah.
Right after, like, he finished his first semester.
Yep.
A couple days later, we went on this big, like, group date situation with a bunch of our friends and spent the whole day together. And then at the end of the day, he's like, will you be my girlfriend? I was like, yes.
Yes,
Yep.
you did.
Yep.
I
And then we
love that.
dated for, like, 5 years, I think is how long it was before we got engaged. So I was like, I'll get through college, I guess.
Yep.
And I got through college. We got married. Yeah, and here we are.
And here you are. Okay, so one of the questions I have, because I think for a lot of our younger audience, like the transition of, like, you've been going to high school or junior high, you were super plugged in, going to junior high, going to high school.
Yeah.
You're at the church all the time, serving, leading, and but then you graduate high school.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, why'd you stay?
Oh, that's such a good question. I stayed for a lot of reasons. I think one of the biggest was because this was definitely my family and my home church, because I knew so many people. So I'd been so plugged in, and a lot of us, for the most part, stayed. Because, like, a lot of people go off to college, or they'll move, like, for their family, or they get married and they move away, like, whatever that looks like. Quite a few of us stayed in the area, and quite a few people ended up on staff. And so...
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is? That they ended up on staff?
Yeah, or they stuck around. Here's the thing, and I'll elaborate on the question, because I think a lot of our young adults right now, and it's a tough transition.
Yeah, 100%.
To go from, like, formative years as a high school student, where maybe you're being forced to go to church because of your family's, it's your family's church or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you are now given freedom.
Yeah.
And now you have a choice.
Yeah.
And it's like, a lot of people are like, they like, well, I don't need church. I don't need to be a part of that. And therefore they experience life without Jesus, without God. Even though they might have been saved as a kid, they're running away from grace.
Yeah.
Even though you cannot run it. They're choosing to ignore the gift they've been given. And it takes a while for them to recognize, I actually want to be in church. So I guess that's part of the question is, like, what was it about your group, your class? What was different about it that now you see so many of those people remaining?
Yeah.
And now they're on staff or they're leading in a high capacity. What's different?
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of that, like what you mentioned, is that people's families go here. Like, it's their family's church. It's not necessarily their church. Neighborhood/Pathway has always been my church. As far as, like, I got plugged in here. My family wasn't going here. Like, I was here. I was here because I wanted to be here, because my friends were here, and because I knew people here. But I think because I got plugged in leadership roles in such a young age, it was like, I'm 100% invested. Like, this is where I belong. This is where the Lord has called me. I love ministry. Like, I love being a part of everything that the church does. It's so amazing. Like, it's good people helping other people that are also good people, but they might need help, or they might not know the Lord, like, whatever capacity that is. So for me, it was like, I'd been plugged in for so long, and it was like, I'm like a young adult, so I'm stepping into college, into other work jobs, like all these things for myself, but also, I'm stepping into other ministries. And it's amazing now that we have the young adults ministry, and it's doing so well, because it's really easy, I think, for a lot of our high schoolers to transition in. I mean, we already have seniors that are going to step in, which is amazing. It's so good. That wasn't, like, young adults ministry was around, but it wasn't at the capacity that it is now. And so for me at that time, I was like, I'm not super interested in young adults. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. So high school ministry, junior high ministry a little bit, worship team, all of these things.
Right.
Because, like, I love the people that are here.
Right.
This is my family of people that I get to see a couple times a week, or maybe a little bit more. But I want to be here because the Lord has called me to be here.
Yeah.
Like, the Lord has given me these opportunities to say, like, I'm invested.
Yeah.
I want you to be invested. You have these gifts for ministry.
Yeah.
I want you here. And I think a lot of people have the gifts of ministry, absolutely, and to lead others. They just haven't been invited to do so, or they don't believe in themselves.
Oh, that's it, girl. Come on.
I have so many thoughts about this.
This is 100. Oh, I love this. Keep going.
Like, you haven't been, and it is hard to, because our church is really big. Yeah. And it has been big for quite a while. Like, I mean, I've considered it large since I started here.
Right.
And to see what it's at now is like, we have a big church.
Right.
And I love it because there's so much opportunity. I mean, there's so many different ministries you can help in.
Yep.
It's not like, oh, we have a pastor over each one and they have a staff member and like they figure it out. It's like, we need volunteers 100%.
Yeah.
And I do think there's so much power in inviting people to step in when they see that, like, oh, yeah, like this person is even slightly interested. I mean, we do that with the photography team a lot. We have a lot of people that are like, oh, I want to learn a camera. I want to help with that. It's like, okay, yeah, absolutely. We would love for you to help.
Absolutely.
Because it's not rocket science, right? We're not trying to do the next marketing like gig or the next viral video. Like, we're just here to help people find and follow God.
Yes.
Which is amazing. And so it's like, just get involved somehow, because I'm sure you have the capacity and the ability to do it. And that's a huge part of it. I mean, literally in any aspect, like in your family, in your job, in your church, the more involved you are, the more you take responsibility, the more you can be a leader and the more involved you're going to be in your life.
Oh, that's it. That's so good.
And that's just what I've seen over and over again for myself and for like people that I know.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big part. Like when I was in high school and Nate was in high school because he's a couple years older than I am. He was part of the high school leadership team. And there was a very set group of people who the pastor at the time invited in to like be a part of this ministry team, take responsibility for this group, come up with ideas. And a lot of those are the people that stuck around or that have gone on to do ministry in other places because they realized like, oh, I have the capacity. I have the ability to do this. The Lord is calling me to this. I just have to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, because I was so plugged in, I had so many people that I consider family, and I love like what we do here as a ministry, as a church. I stuck around for sure.
Yeah.
It also helped that like, I got married to the man who is the technical director, so he's on staff.
Yeah, you're kind of you're.
So I'm here a lot.
You're here a lot.
Actually what ended up happening. I'm here for ministries and like for church and for me, but I'm also here for other stuff that he does too. So it's like we're here a lot.
Yeah, but what I love about it is you're not here. You don't feel for. I don't want to speak for you, but I think you could say it this way: is like you don't feel forced to be here.
No, never.
Yeah. I think that's such a huge thing, especially as a wife of someone who's on staff.
Yeah.
It can feel like, oh well, you must have to be or do all the things. It's like no. You get to be. Yeah. But it's not the pressure that you have to be.
Yeah. And a huge part of that is because I'm so independent in what I'm doing here at the church. It's like I'm plugged into these ministries.
Yes.
And like if we weren't married or if I had never dated Nate, like whatever that looked like, I would probably still be here.
You'd still be connected.
I'd still be here, yeah.
See, I think that is you. And I know I'm talking to the choir here because I know you and I, we've had many conversations about this. Yeah. But this is why I always encourage anybody, whether you're a young adult, I focus on young adults because I know it's like the big transitional year. And if you can figure out what we're talking about and then it will keep you grounded as you get married, as you have kids, as you have careers, as you enter into adulthood or you become a grandparent, all the things, right? Because it doesn't stop. It's one of those things that like the church is the body of Christ. Your opportunities are endless to be used and sometimes used can be out of context, but where God is using you in the right time, right place, and you're in a healthy, your identity is secure in the Lord, you understand your riches in Christ, and you have a growing relationship, and then you are used by God in this beautiful thing where you're helping somebody, like you said, who maybe just can't put the oxygen mask on themselves. Yeah. And you're like, let me help you. Yeah. Let me help you get connected. Let me not be the one who's the one connecting you to everything, because eventually they have to choose it for themselves. Yes. But I love what you said. Invitation. Yeah. Invitation is huge. That is everything.
And I think another big part of it too is like you realize the impact the ministry has when you've been in it. Yeah. For sure. So like when I was in high school ministry, that was a lot of formative years. I mean, all of your growing up, getting into an adult, like it's all formative. But being in high school ministry and like seeing the progress that was made under like the leadership that we had at the time, like I was so invested in continuing to see that happen that I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll stick around. Like that invitation was extended to me because normally we don't do that. You have to like actually become an adult before you come back. But there's a few of us that was like, oh yeah, like we would love to have you guys stay for a little while. And it was like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because I'm so invested in what this ministry is doing. Yeah. Which is a huge part of it. And if there's a ministry you're interested in, like join it. Yeah. Be a part of it. And maybe that's a leadership position. Maybe that's just like experiencing the ministry. But whatever that looks like that's where you find community. That's where you find healing potentially. Yeah. Like we've heard a lot about it in different stories of people going to re-engage and like having their marriages drastically change for the better.
Yes.
And then now they're leaders for that ministry
it's the best.
because they've been,
Right.
equipped to do so, which is so amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, you're answering all the questions before I even asked them. But it's so. I mean, I personally too. I mean, it was the same way for me. Like I used to I church hopped multiple churches when I was at Simpson, and I was trying to figure out where obviously a lot of the young adults wanted to go to where the worship was really cool and dark and emotional, and it was awesome. And I loved it. I was like, yeah, I'm about it. And then I would go to this church because they had a really good outreach, and so I had church hopped a bunch. But the thing that got me here at this church was the opportunities to get plugged in.
Yeah.
And it took a leader to say, hey, I see this in you.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it in myself. I was like, you crazy.
Never.
and they're like, no, we want you to be a part of this. And they brought me in and they gave me grace, but they gave me opportunity and they equipped me and they let me fail.
That's so amazing.
They let me fail forward. Like I should not have been in the position I was in at 19 years old. I'm looking around, I'm like, why was I leading worship at 19? But then I look around and I see like our other young adults like Cedric doing the same thing. And I'm like, I get it.
Here we are.
Here we are. The cycle continues. But I'm like, it's because of that gave me proximity to leaders, that gave me opportunities in this church that then changed what I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
And it gave me 10 years of working in the worship field, so to say. But I'm forever grateful for Pathway being a church that is not shy of opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's not to fill a slot.
No.
I didn't feel. I mean, I think at some churches it can be obvious that they're trying to get something from you.
Yeah.
But what I love about Pathway, it feels at the core, hey, this is the best thing for you.
Yeah.
And you just need an opportunity to be used. And if that's not the right fit for you or the right time for you, great, get into care coaching.
Yeah.
Great, get into re-engage. Get into small groups where you can grow and heal and just be yourself. But hey, also while you're on the road to healing, or maybe you've already healed, there's also an opportunity to get plugged in and find out how God has uniquely wired you for the work of the gospel.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love that our church is very much like, hey, here's an opportunity. If it is the right time and you want to do it, great. We'd love to have you. If it's not, say no and we'll try again later. That's very much what we're centered on, because a lot of churches, I think especially in smaller churches that don't have necessarily the same setup, the same resources, the same guides, it very much is like, it can be, hey, we really need you to help. And you're so well equipped for it, but then you experience a lot of things like burnout and et cetera. Because we have friends, because Nate went to Simpson and he has a youth ministry degree, which I think is hilarious. For a long time, everybody was like, oh, are you excited to be a youth pastor's wife? And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's where the Lord is calling him. But 100% I will be, and I love youth ministry, but we'll see what happens. And it's just we have a lot of friends that ended up in positions where it was like, oh, we have to do all this extra, we're trying to make it all work. But and so it makes me very grateful at our church that here's an opportunity. We'd love to have you.
Yeah.
Say no if you want to. Type situation.
Yeah. No pressure.
Yeah.
But I think part of the pressure that I always want to give people is it's a healthy pressure.
Yes.
This is the difference of you eating a really healthy meal and enjoying the repercussions of that meal versus you just continuing to not sit down and enjoy a good meal.
Yeah.
You're robbing yourself.
Yeah. Well, healthy things are also hard. It can be hard to swallow, but it's good for you.
Oh, we could do another hour on that statement. Healthy
we could
things.
Do so many.
Oh, that is
so many things. And
good.
That's so wild to think about, because I was at this church when you were here, I think as an intern or something. And so I remember those years.
Oh, Lord Jesus.
While you were here, we were very, because I think I was in junior high-ish age. And so it was very much just seeing you every once in a while. I'm pretty sure you were on the worship team for a summer camp band that I went to. Yeah. Amazing. But it's so funny to be in this space.
No shoes, a lot of V-necks.
A lot of
torn jeans.
Yeah. It's hilarious to think back on those times, because there's a whole group of people that and I knew all of them and still know all of them. And it's wow, what amazing things the Lord does.
Changed a little bit since then.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. But it's so surreal to remember those times when I was in that ministry and I was young, and then to sit here and do this interview and talk together and we're friends at this point because we've grown up and we're older, all the things, but it's wow, the Lord just does amazing things and brings people back around and reconnects people in just incredible ways.
Well, and I'll say this because I know it's so powerful to see is like, you just don't know the fruit that's going to be sowed by all the work that you've been a part of and done.
Yeah.
And I think longevity is powerful. And I think that's what we have a lot of here at Pathway, which is pretty cool to see, our lead pastor be here, 20 to almost 24 years, something like that. Our executive pastor, Pastor Todd, been here like 20, Pastor Tim, 15, like Pastor
Long
Ken's
time.
been here a minute. And so many others, right? And so many volunteers as well, who have just been here and faithful. And I love that because there's something special about this place.
Yeah,
and
100%.
And are we perfect? No. Do we make mistakes? Often.
Yeah.
But do we care about Jesus and the gospel?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And we're willing to be messy in order to reach people and in order to see people walk in grace and truth. And I love that you're so connected. As a final thought, I think you already said it, but I guess we could keep going. But I have to wrap up at some point.
Yeah.
We'll have you on. We'll have you on as a co-host, I think, next time. That'd
Let's
be
do
fun.
it.
That'd be fun.
I'm always happy to do that.
If you were to give one word of encouragement for someone who maybe they've checked us out online, right? We get a lot of that. People are just tuning online, or they're young adults and they're watching us on social media and they're like, what events are coming up? And maybe they're currently church hopping and they're just trying to figure this whole thing out. What would you encourage them with?
One word.
Not one word,
Excuse me. Because I don't do anything with one word. Like
one general thought.
One word. Dive into it. So I guess if it was going to be one word, it'd be dive. But just step out of your comfort zone. And maybe that's like you feel a prompting from the Lord of like, oh, I'm going to try this ministry because I used to work with kids, or I love kids, so I'm going to work in youth ministry, or I just want to hand out the guides as people walk in the door, because
Easy.
that's like,
it's not scary.
I don't have to do I don't have to necessarily have big conversations, but I can at least smile and hand something to someone. If you're at all interested in taking the next step, if you're like, oh, I know the Lord, but how do I actually be a part of this church?
Yeah.
Be connected in it. Actually get
step.
into it. And if that feels like too much, find a couple people who you can connect with and become a circle or whatever you want to call it, and actually get to know people who are walking with the Lord. Because people's stories are so powerful.
Yeah.
Being on prayer team is one of the most impactful things I've ever done in all of my years of ministry, because you just get to hear little snippets of people's lives. And even though a lot of times it's hard, because we like to pray when it's hard, for sure, that's when we really lean on the Lord. But hearing stories about how their life has been good and how it might be harder now, or the hard thing they walked through, and so now they're so thankful to the Lord for what's happened. Hearing people's stories is going to open your eyes up so much to not only the love that the Lord has for us, but his capabilities, right? Because it can feel very much I'm so alone in whatever I'm going through, and I have no idea if the Lord is working in my life, or I have no idea if the Lord cares about me, or if he sees me, or, all these questions that I think crop up when life gets really hard. When you hear other people's stories, even when they're in the thick of it, and it's I just don't understand what's going on, you have such a deeper understanding for the love that the Lord has for us, and the intention, and the fact that we might not see it now, but we're going, somebody else is going to see it later, is so important. Yeah. So,
I love that. Yeah. Dive in, get connected, embrace the awkward, and find the people that are going to push you towards the right hard things in life.
Yeah, the right hard things.
That's good. Azure, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for jumping on and being with us. Blessed to have you. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're loved and appreciated.
Oh, thanks.